Hello and welcome. You have ventured into the dark heart of Baldur's Gate 3, where villains lurk in every shadow and corruption festers beneath the surface of civilization. Today, you will explore the depths of evil that permeate this world, from the gods themselves down to the mortals who serve their wicked designs. You will learn of tyranny, murder, and death incarnate. You will discover the stories of those who have fallen so far into darkness that redemption seems impossible. You will understand the forces that threaten not just the Sword Coast, but all of Faerun itself. The villains of Baldur's Gate 3 are not simple monsters to be slain. They are complex beings with histories that span centuries, with motivations that twist and turn through tragedy and ambition. Some were born into evil, shaped by forces beyond their control. Others chose their dark paths willingly, embracing corruption for power or vengeance. All of them, however, play their parts in a grand conspiracy that threatens to enslave every mind in the realm. At the center of this conspiracy stand three gods, the Dead Three they are called: Bane, the Lord of Tyranny; Baal, the Lord of Murder; Miakul, the Lord of Death. These are not beings of pure divine essence, born from the fabric of creation itself. No, these gods were once mortal men, ambitious and ruthless, who climbed to godhood through a bargain with an ancient power. Their story begins long before the events of Baldur's Gate 3, in a time when the realms were still young and the boundaries between mortality and divinity were not yet firmly established. The tale of the Dead Three begins with a deity far older than they, a god whose name has been largely forgotten by the common folk of Faerun. Jurgal, the scribe of the dead, the final scribe, the lord of the end of everything. Jurgal once held dominion over all aspects of death. He was the keeper of the dead, the judge of souls, the recorder of every ending. For eons uncounted, Jurgal performed his duties with mechanical precision, cataloging every death, every ending, every final breath drawn in all the planes of existence. But eternity wore upon Jurgal. The endless cycle of death and documentation became meaningless to him. He grew weary of his divine responsibilities, tired of the weight of his domains. In his divine ennui, Jurgal desired nothing more than to be free of his burdens, to pass his responsibilities to others who might find meaning in what he had come to see as a pointless exercise. Yet gods cannot simply abandon their portfolios. The cosmic order requires that divine domains be maintained, that someone must always hold the power and the responsibility. It was into this situation that three mortal men arrived. Bane, Baal, and Miakul were mortals of terrible ambition and great power. They had walked the path of evil throughout their mortal lives, each excelling in their particular brands of wickedness. Bane was a tyrant without peer, a man who understood that true power came from dominating the wills of others. Baal was a killer of supernatural skill, a man who had elevated murder to an art form and reveled in the taking of life. Miakul was a necromancer of dread reputation, a man who had delved deep into the mysteries of death and undeath. These three mortals came before Jurgal, seeking to claim his power for themselves. They were prepared to fight each other and the god himself for the right to ascend. They demanded that Jurgal surrender his divine domains to them, but Jurgal surprised them. The ancient god did not fight. He did not resist. Instead, he welcomed their arrival. Here, at last, were beings who desired what he wished to be rid of. Here were mortals ambitious enough to take on the responsibilities he had come to view as burdens. Jurgal proposed a division of his power, rather than giving everything to one claimant. Rather than watching these three ambitious mortals destroy each other in combat for his domains, he would split his portfolio three ways. Each of the mortals would become a god. Each would receive a portion of Jurgal's former power. Each would take responsibility for one aspect of death and ending. The three mortals agreed to this arrangement, and so the bargain was struck. But the question remained: who would receive which domain? The three mortals could not agree among themselves. Each desired the greatest share of power. Each believed themselves most worthy of the most significant portfolio. To settle the matter, Jurgal proposed a game. They would cast lots. They would play a game of chance to determine who received what. Some legends say they played a game of skulls. Others claim they cast knucklebones. The specific game matters less than the outcome. Bane won the first draw. He claimed the domain of tyranny, of strife, of hatred and fear. He would become the god who represented the cruel exercise of power over others, the deity of tyrants, and those who would subjugate the free will of mortals. His would be the domain of control, of forcing others to bend to his will, of ruling through fear and domination. Bane embraced this portfolio eagerly, for it aligned perfectly with his mortal ambitions. He had always sought to control others, to force them into submission, to build empires of fear. Miakul won the second draw. He claimed the domain of death itself, of decay, of the inevitable ending that comes to all living things. He would become the god who presided over the actual moment of death, the transition from life to the afterlife, the slow rot of all things. His would be the domain of the grave, of age and weariness, of entropy. Miakul was pleased with this outcome, for his studies as a necromancer had prepared him well for understanding the mysteries of mortality's end. That left Baal with the final domain. He received the portfolio of murder, of violent death, of killing and bloodshed. While some might have seen this as the least of the three domains, Baal embraced it with fervor. He would be the god of those who took life by force, the deity of assassins and killers, the lord of violent ends. His would be the domain of the blade in the dark, the poison in the cup, the sudden strike that ends a life. For Baal, who had always reveled in the act of killing itself, this was perfect. And so, the dead three were born. Three mortal men ascended to godhood, taking on the divided responsibilities of what Jurgal had once held alone. Jurgal himself stepped back, becoming essential to the new gods of death. Content to keep records and maintain the bureaucracy of the afterlife without the weight of ultimate responsibility. The cosmic order was maintained, the domains were filled, and 3 new and terrible gods took their places in the pantheon of Pharaon. For ages, the dead 3 ruled over their domains. They gathered worshippers, they empowered their chosen, they played the games that gods play. Bane's followers built tyrannical empires. Baal's cultists murdered in his name, offering the blood of victims to their dark lord. Miakul's necromancers raised armies of undead and spread fear of death's inevitability. The dead 3 became fixtures of the Pharunian pantheon, feared and sometimes worshipped by those who embraced evil or sought dark power. But godhood for former mortals is not always secure. During an event called the Time of Troubles, the gods were cast down from their divine realms and forced to walk Toril in mortal form. This catastrophic event, which occurred in the year 1358 Dale Reckoning, changed the face of the pantheon forever. Many gods died during the Time of Troubles, their mortal forms slain while they were vulnerable. The dead 3 were among those who fell. Bane, Baal, and Miakul all met their ends during this chaotic period, their mortal avatars destroyed, their divine essences scattered or claimed by others. The death of the dead 3 should have been final. Gods can die, and when they do, their portfolios typically pass to other deities or are absorbed back into the cosmic order. But the dead 3 were ambitious, even in death. They had plans, contingencies, ways to ensure their eventual return. Bane had his chosen, who could serve as vessels for his return. Baal had scattered his essence into his offspring, the Baalspawn, ensuring that his divine spark would survive in the blood of his children. Miakul had bound portions of his essence to powerful artifacts and locations. In the centuries that followed the Time of Troubles, 2 of the dead 3 successfully returned to divinity. Bane was the first to return, his essence reconstituted through the sacrifice of his son, Iatu Exvim. Miakul's resurrection came later, his divine essence gradually reconstituting itself through his various anchors. Baal's return proved more difficult, requiring the death of his last 2 living children, the last repositories of his divine essence. But return he did, his resurrection occurring in the murder tribunal beneath Baldur's Gate, his power flowing back into the world through rivers of blood. Now, in the present day, all 3 of the dead 3 have returned to godhood. They are diminished from their former power, weakened by death and resurrection. But they are gods once more, and they have learned from their mistakes. They have plotted together, schemed in concert, built a conspiracy that will ensure their power grows beyond what it once was. They have chosen mortal champions, imbued them with portions of their divine essence, and set them to work on a grand design. This design is the Absolute, a false god, a fabricated deity designed to draw worship from the masses. Behind the Absolute stands an elder brain, an ancient and powerful entity of the Mind Flayers, controlled by the Crown of Karsus, an artifact of immense power stolen from the Hells themselves. The Dead Three planned to use the Absolute to gather an army of mind-controlled thralls, to spread their influence across Faerun, to gather power through the worship and fear of millions. To execute this plan, each of the Dead Three chose a mortal champion. These chosen would bear a portion of their god's power, would work together to bring about the Absolute's rise, would serve as generals in the army of the enslaved. Bane chose Enver Gortash, a cunning arms dealer and political mastermind. Baal chose Orin the Red, a murderous artist who had supplanted the original chosen through violent betrayal. Miakul chose Ketheric Thorm, a tragic figure who had been brought back from death itself to serve. These three chosen, working in concert, nearly succeeded in enslaving all of Faerun. They infiltrated Mind Flayer tadpoles with pieces of the Absolute's will. They infected thousands with these parasites. They built an army at Moonrise Towers. They prepared to unleash the Elder Brain upon the world, to transform victims into Mind Flayers loyal to the Absolute, to create an empire of enslaved minds that would worship the Dead Three and feed them power beyond measure. But their plan contained flaws. The chosen did not entirely trust each other. The gods they served had their own agendas. The Elder Brain itself harbored ambitions beyond being a mere puppet. And most critically, a group of unlikely heroes, themselves infected with the Mind Flayer parasites, would rise to challenge the Absolute and its creators. You, the player, the adventurer who washes up on the beach after the Nautiloid crash, you become the pivot point upon which the fate of Faerun turns. The Dead Three represent the foundation of villainy in Baldur's Gate 3. They are the ultimate antagonists, the gods whose schemes drive the main plot. But they work through their chosen, through mortal agents who have their own stories, their own motivations, their own tragic or wicked histories. To truly understand the evil that threatens Faerun, you must understand not just the gods, but the mortals who serve them. Section 2. Ketheric The Chosen of Miakul. The first of the chosen you will encounter is a man whose very existence defies death itself. General Ketheric Thorm stands as an undead monument to grief. A being who has bartered away pieces of his soul across centuries in pursuit of a single, impossible goal. To understand Ketheric Thorm, you must first understand that he was not always a monster. Once, long ago, he was simply a father who loved his family too much to accept their loss. Centuries before the events of Baldur's Gate 3, Ketheric Thorm ruled the lands around Moonrise Towers as a devout follower of Selûne, the Moon Maiden, goddess of light and protection against the darkness. His rule was peaceful and prosperous. The region around Moonrise Towers, known as Riethwin, thrived under his governance. Followers of Selûne gathered in these lands, finding sanctuary and community under Ketheric's protection. Moonrise Towers itself stood as a bastion dedicated to the Moon Maiden, a symbol of light pushing back against the darkness. Ketheric was not alone in his happiness. He shared his life with his wife, Melodia, a woman he cherished deeply. Together they had a daughter, Isabel, who became the light of Ketheric's existence. There was also a son, Theobald, though less is known of him in Ketheric's earlier, happier days. The Thorm family represented everything good about nobility in service to benevolent deities. They used their power to protect rather than exploit, to nurture rather than destroy. For a time, Ketheric Thorm was a genuinely good man, a faithful servant of a good goddess, a loving husband and father. But tragedy has a way of finding even the most protected souls. Melodia fell ill and died, leaving Ketheric devastated. The loss of his beloved wife struck him deeply, but he still had Isabel, still had his daughter to anchor him to the light. He grieved, as any husband would, but he endured. He continued his duties, continued his worship of Selûne, continued to rule his lands. The faith that had sustained him through peaceful times now became his anchor in sorrow. Then Isabel died as well. The exact circumstances remain unclear, shrouded in the mists of centuries past. Some believe that Shar, the goddess of darkness and loss, had a hand in these deaths, that the Lady of Loss targeted Ketheric's family specifically to break him and turn him from Selûne's light. Whether this is true, or whether simple mortal illness and misfortune claimed both wife and daughter, the result was the same. Ketheric Thorm was utterly broken. The death of Isabel shattered something fundamental in Ketheric's soul. A father's love for his daughter is a powerful force, and when that love has nowhere to go, when the object of that devotion is ripped away, it can twist into something terrible. Ketheric could not accept Isabel's death. He could not move forward, could not heal, could not find peace. His grief consumed him entirely, transforming from sorrow into rage, from mourning into obsession. And in his darkest moment, agents of Shar were there, whispering in his ear, offering him a path through his pain. Ketheric renounced Selûne, the goddess who had been the center of his life, the deity he had served faithfully for decades, the moon maiden who had blessed his rule and his family. He turned his back on her entirely, based on what we know of his deteriorating mental state and the testimonies found in his journals. His grief and anger led him to blame Selûne for failing to protect his family. If the goddess of light and protection could not keep his wife and daughter safe, what good was she? What purpose did faith serve if it could not prevent the loss of everything that mattered? He turned instead to Shar, the goddess who represented everything Selûne opposed. Where Selûne brought light, Shar brought darkness. Where Selûne offered hope, Shar offered the cold comfort of accepting loss and forgetting pain. The Lady of Loss promised Ketheric what he desperately wanted, a way to deal with his grief, a path that acknowledged his rage and pain rather than asking him to move past it. And most importantly, Shar offered him a bargain: serve her, build her an army, carry out her will, and she would arrange for Isabel to be resurrected. Ketheric threw himself into Shar's service with the same devotion he had once given to Selûne. Moonrise Towers, once a beacon of the Moon Maiden's light, became a fortress of shadow. Ketheric systematically erased every trace of Selûne from his lands. Symbols of the moon goddess were torn down and destroyed. Shrines were desecrated. Followers of Selûne were given a choice that was no choice at all. Convert to Shar, flee the region entirely, or die. Those who remained faithful to the Moon Maiden were forced to practice their religion in secret, hiding their devotion, while Sharon's spies infiltrated their gathering places. Beneath Riethwin, beneath his own town, Ketheric constructed a massive temple to Shar. This was no simple shrine or chapel. It was a grand edifice carved into the stone below the surface world, a place of darkness and trials called the Gauntlet of Shar. Within this temple, Ketheric began training an army of dark justiciars, elite warriors completely devoted to Shar's cause. These were not ordinary soldiers. They underwent brutal trials, tests of faith and endurance that killed many candidates. Those who survived emerged as fanatical servants of the Lady of Loss, ready to cleanse the world of light in Shar's name. But the creation of the Dark Justiciars required something more than just training and devotion. It required a perpetual source of power, a way to imbue these warriors with supernatural abilities. For this, Ketheric needed a very specific prisoner. Dame Eileen, the Night Song, daughter of Selûne herself, an immortal Aasimar who served as her mother's champion. Eileen was Isabel's lover, a fact that added personal venom to Ketheric's desire to capture her. Historical records suggest he had quarreled with Eileen even in his days serving Selûne. Uncomfortable with his daughter's relationship with the immortal warrior, working with Balthazar, a necromancer who became his closest confidant, Ketheric devised a trap. They lured Eileen into the Shadowfell, the dark plane of existence that Shar herself had created. There, Balthazar had prepared an infernal cage, a soul cage specifically designed to hold an immortal being. When Eileen arrived, expecting to render aid to someone in need, she was ambushed and imprisoned. The cage held her fast, bound by magic too powerful for even an Aasimar to break. But mere imprisonment was not the extent of Ketheric's plans for the Night Song. Eileen's immortality meant she could not truly die. No matter what was done to her, she would return, her wounds healing, her life force reconstituting itself. Balthazar realized this property could be exploited. He designed a ritual whereby initiates into the Dark Justiciars would kill the Night Song as the final test of their devotion. Each death would fuel dark magic, imbuing the successful initiate with supernatural power. And because Eileen was immortal, she would revive, ready to be killed again by the next initiate. This horrific cycle continued for an unknown period. Eileen died over and over, murdered repeatedly by those seeking to become Dark Justiciars, her immortal essence twisted into a tool for creating Shar's champions. the pain and trauma of endless deaths in the Shadowfell. Unable to truly die or escape, subjected to this torture by the father of her beloved Isabel. This was a fate arguably worse than any mortal death could be. With his army of dark justiciars complete, Ketheric prepared to unleash them upon the Sword Coast. His goal was nothing less than the conquest of the entire region, spreading Shar's darkness across all the lands, extinguishing the light wherever it could be found. He had become one of the most dangerous individuals in Faerun, commanding forces that could genuinely threaten to plunge the world into an age of shadow. But Ketheric's crusade did not go unchallenged. The Harpers, an organization dedicated to preserving balance and fighting tyranny, learned of Ketheric's army and his plans. They allied with the Druids of the Emerald Grove and assembled their own forces to stand against the Dark Justiciars. A great battle ensued, Harper and Druid against Sharon and Dark Justiciar. Light against darkness fought across the lands around Moonrise Towers. The battle went against Ketheric. Despite his powerful army, despite his fanatical warriors, despite his devotion to Shar, he was defeated. His Dark Justiciars were virtually all slain. His forces were routed. Ketheric himself was struck down, his mortal body failing at last. The Harpers and Druids had won, had stopped the shadow from consuming the Sword Coast. Victory should have been complete, but Ketheric Thorm, in his final moments, unleashed one last act of spite and rage. As death took him, he released a terrible curse upon the land, a shadow curse that would persist long after his body went cold. This curse spread across the region like a plague, transforming the once beautiful lands around Moonrise Towers into a nightmare realm. Those who had survived the battle, Harper and Druid alike, found themselves afflicted by the curse. The very light fled from these lands, replaced by oppressive darkness that twisted and corrupted everything it touched. Those who could not escape the curse's initial spread died, or were transformed into monstrous versions of themselves. The shadow curse created shadow-cursed creatures, beings of malevolence and pain that would haunt the region for the next century. Riethwin, the town that had once thrived under Ketheric's benevolent rule, became a ghost town inhabited only by the cursed and the undead. The land itself became sick, trees withering, water becoming tainted, the very ground seeming to rot. Ketheric's body was buried in the Thorm Mausoleum, interred with whatever honors defeated enemies are given. The threat, it seemed, was finally ended. Ketheric Thorm was dead, his army destroyed, his dark ambitions ended. The shadow curse remained, a lingering scar on the land, but at least the architect of that darkness was gone, or so everyone believed. Over a century passed, likely between 100 and 110 years, based on the accounts of those who remember the battle and the records kept in Baldur's Gate. The shadow-cursed lands remained a blighted wound on Faerun, but the rest of the world moved on. New generations grew up knowing Ketheric Thorm only as a historical villain, a cautionary tale about the dangers of grief turning to obsession. The Harpers who had fought him passed into legend themselves. It seemed that time had finally closed the book on Ketheric Thorm's story. But death is not always final, especially for those who have attracted the attention of gods. Miakul, the Lord of Death, one of the dead three, saw potential in Ketheric Thorm. Here was a man who had already served two goddesses with absolute devotion. Here was a soul that had proven willing to commit atrocities in pursuit of a singular goal. Here was a being whose entire existence centered on defying death, on refusing to accept loss. Miakul offered Ketheric a bargain. Miakul resurrected Ketheric Thorm, pulling his soul back from whatever afterlife had claimed it, and placing it once more into a body. But this was not a simple resurrection. Ketheric returned as something more and less than he had been. He was undead, a being sustained by necromantic magic and divine will. His elven features remained, but there was something wrong about him, something that marked him as no longer truly alive. And with his resurrection came a new purpose. Miakul tasked Ketheric with forming an alliance with the chosen of the other dead three. Together, these three chosen would enact the god's plan for the Absolute, would build an army of the mind-controlled, would bring death and tyranny and murder to Farron on a scale never before seen. In exchange for this service, Miakul promised Ketheric the one thing he had never stopped wanting. Isabel would be resurrected, truly brought back to life, restored to him at last, for a man whose entire descent into darkness had been motivated by the desire to have his daughter back. This offer was irresistible. Ketheric accepted Miakul's terms without hesitation. He became the chosen of Miakul, the general who would lead the armies of the Absolute, the immortal commander who could not be stopped. With Balthazar's help, still serving Ketheric even beyond death, Isabel was indeed brought back to life. Miakul, as the god of death, possessed the power to truly resurrect someone, not as undead, but as a living being once more. But the reunion Ketheric had dreamed of for over a century did not go as planned. When Isabel saw what her father had become, when she beheld his undead visage and understood the depth of his corruption, she was horrified. This was not the father she remembered. This was not the man who had ruled Riethwin in Selûne's name. This was a monster wearing her father's face, a being that had committed countless atrocities, that had tortured her beloved island, that had cursed the land itself. Isabel fled into the darkness, protected by Selûne, refusing to stay with the creature her father had become. The rejection broke something in Ketheric that had not yet been destroyed. He had done everything, betrayed everything, become a monster, all to have Isabel back. And she had looked at him with horror and run away. The one goal that had motivated his every action for over a century was revealed as futile. Even resurrected, even alive again, Isabel wanted nothing to do with him. Yet Ketheric did not stop. Perhaps he could not stop. He had gone too far, sacrificed too much, become too monstrous to turn back now. He threw himself into his role as Miakul's chosen with grim determination. If he could not have his daughter's love, he would at least fulfill his purpose. He would serve Miakul, would work with Gortash and Orin, would help bring about the Absolute's reign. Ketheric possessed one crucial advantage that made him invaluable to the conspiracy. He was effectively immortal, unkillable by conventional means. This invulnerability came from the night song from Dame Eilen, still imprisoned after all these years. Ketheric had discovered that he could bind himself to Eilen through dark magic, creating a connection whereby, as long as she lived, he could not truly die. Any wound would heal. Any killing blow would fail to end him. He was functionally invincible so long as the connection held. This made Ketheric the perfect general for the Absolute's forces. He could lead from the front, could take risks no mortal commander would dare, could survive battles that would kill anyone else. At Moonrise Towers, now restored and serving as the headquarters for the Absolute's operations in the region, Ketheric commanded an army of true souls, individuals infected with illithid tadpoles and bound to the Absolute's will. He coordinated with Gortash in Baldur's Gate and Orin in the city's underbelly, all three chosen working toward their mutual goal. But Ketheric's invulnerability was also his weakness. The very thing that made him unkillable was something that could be discovered and exploited. When you, the protagonist infected with an illithid tadpole, but mysteriously immune to the Absolute's control, begin investigating Moonrise Towers and the source of the Absolute's power, you inevitably learn of the Night Song, various allies, including the Harper Jaira, the necromancer Balthazar, and the zealot Zirel, all mention in various ways that a magical relic grants Ketheric his immortality. The revelation of Dame Eilen's imprisonment and her connection to Ketheric's invulnerability gives you the means to defeat him. By venturing into the Shadowfell, into the Gauntlet of Shar, where Eilen has been held for over a century, you can free her from her cage. When you do, when you shatter the infernal prison and allow the Night Song to finally escape her torment, Ketheric's invulnerability ends. He becomes mortal once more, vulnerable to the weapons and magic that he had previously shrugged off without concern. The confrontation with Ketheric occurs in multiple stages. First, you face him atop Moonrise Towers, where he fights with the strength of Miakul behind him, but without his former invulnerability. When defeated there, he retreats deeper into the complex, down into the Mind Flayer colony that exists beneath Moonrise Towers. There, the true nature of the Absolute is revealed. You witness Ketheric speaking with Gortash and Orin. See the netherstones they each possess. Understand that the Absolute is actually an elder brain controlled by the Crown of Karsus. The final battle with Ketheric takes place in the depths of the Mind Flayer colony. After being defeated, Ketheric does not simply die. Instead, he gives himself entirely to Miakul, transforming into the Apostle of Miakul. a massive undead abomination that represents the full power of the Lord of Death made manifest. This final form is a twisted amalgamation of bone and necrotic energy, a boss encounter that tests everything you have learned up to this point. When the Apostle of Miakul is finally destroyed, Ketheric returns to his mortal form one last time. In his final moments, he whispers Isabel's name, the daughter he had tried so desperately to reclaim, the family he had destroyed everything to resurrect. Then he collapses, truly dead at last. From his corpse, you claim the first Netherstone, one of the 3 artifacts needed to control the Absolute. Ketheric Thorm's story is ultimately a tragedy. He was not born evil. He began as a good man who loved his family and served a benevolent goddess. But grief twisted him, obsession consumed him, and in his desperate refusal to accept loss, he became the architect of countless atrocities. His tale serves as a warning about the dangers of love without wisdom, of devotion without balance, of the terrible things people will do when they cannot let go of what they have lost. Section 3. Orin the Red, the Chosen of Baal. Orin the Red is madness given form, a creature of murder who has never known anything but blood and devotion to the Lord of Murder. Where Ketheric Thorm fell into evil through grief and Gortash climbed to power through ambition, Orin was born into darkness itself. She has never experienced normalcy, has never lived a day outside the teachings of Baal's cult, has never known love that was not twisted by the demands of murder. Her tragedy is not that she fell, but that she was never given the opportunity to rise. To understand Orin, you must first understand the nature of Baalspawn. When Baal walked the mortal plane during the time of troubles, before his divine form was destroyed, he spent his final days engaging in a calculated plan to ensure his eventual resurrection. He seeded his essence across Farron by fathering children with countless mortals. These offspring, the Baalspawn, carried fragments of their father's divine spark within their blood. Most Baalspawn inherited an urge toward violence, a compulsion to kill that burned in their veins. Some resisted this urge, fought against their nature, tried to be better than their dark heritage. Others embraced it fully. Orin is a second-generation Baalspawn, and her lineage is deeply disturbed even by the standards of those touched by the murder god's blood. Her mother was Helena Anshev, herself a Baalspawn and a devoted priestess of Baal. Her father was Servok Anshev, who is also Helena's father, making him both Orin's father and grandfather in an act of deliberate incest. This was not an accident of passion or a mistake. It was a calculated decision by the leadership of Baal's cult. They believed that concentrating Baal's blood, having 2 Baalspawn produce offspring together, would create a child with an even stronger connection to the murder god. The result was Orin, born with pale blue skin, striking white eyes, and the ability to shapeshift. A changeling nature that made her the perfect instrument for covert murder. From the moment of her birth, Orin was claimed by the cult of Baal. She was not raised as a child, but as a weapon, a tool to be honed and perfected based on what we learn from Orin's fragmented memories and the testimonies of other cultists. Her childhood appears to have consisted almost entirely of lessons in killing, in the proper rituals to honor Baal, in the artistic presentation of murder as an offering to her divine grandfather. The cult of Baal operated from the ruins beneath Baldur's Gate, in a temple long thought destroyed, but actually hidden in the depths below the city. This temple served as both worship space and training ground. Here, the faithful of Baal practiced their dark arts, competing with each other to create the most impressive murders, the most artistic kills, the most worthy offerings to their god. The cult maintained a strict hierarchy, with the most skilled murderers rising to positions of authority. At the top stood Baal's chosen, the individual who carried the greatest portion of the gods' favor and power. Orin grew up in this environment, surrounded by killers, learning from childhood that murder was not just acceptable, but holy. She had no peers her own age who lived normal lives, no friends who played innocent games, no examples of healthy relationships or normal human connection. Everyone around her was a devotee of murder, and everyone judged her by her ability to kill creatively and efficiently. Her talent for the craft became apparent early. She possessed not just the will to kill, but an artist's eye for presentation. To Orin, murder was not simply the ending of life. It was a canvas upon which she could paint in blood and viscera. She approached each killing as a sculptor approaches stone or a painter approaches canvas. The placement of bodies, the arrangement of severed limbs, the patterns made by splattered blood, all of these elements were components in her artistic vision. Throughout Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3, you can discover Orin's installations, elaborate murder scenes she has arranged across the city. Each one tells a story, conveys a message, demonstrates her twisted creativity. One of her most notable creations is the open-hand temple murder, where a victim is found poisoned in a place of healing and mercy. Another is the elaborate scene at the Blushing Mermaid, where bodies are arranged in grotesque tableaus. These are not random killings or simple assassinations. They are Orin's attempts to create art, to demonstrate her devotion to Baal through the beauty she finds in death. In her broken mind, she believes her father will appreciate the artistry, will recognize her as his most devoted child, will grant her the ultimate blessing of being consumed entirely by his divine will. But Orin's position in the cult was not always secure. For many years, she served as the second in command, the understudy to Baal's true chosen. This individual was known as the Dark Urge, a mysterious figure whose connection to Baal surpassed even Orin's concentrated bloodline. The Dark Urge was, in fact, Baal's direct creation, not merely a child born of Baal's mortal dalliances, but a being fashioned directly from the god's own dead flesh after his resurrection. This made the Dark Urge superior in the cult's hierarchy, the rightful heir to to Bal's full power and favor. Orin served the Dark Urge loyally for a time, carrying out missions, performing murders as instructed, acting as the loyal second to Bal's chosen instrument. But loyalty in a cult of murder is always conditional, and Orin harbored ambitions of her own. She wanted what her brother, as she sometimes called the Dark Urge, possessed. She wanted to be Bal's favorite, to be the one who stood closest to her divine father, to be the recipient of his full blessing and power. The relationship between Orin and the Dark Urge was complex, mixing familial feeling with intense rivalry, cooperation with barely concealed resentment. The Dark Urge, meanwhile, had formed an alliance outside the cult of Bal. They had partnered with Gortash, the chosen of Bane, and together these two had conceived of an audacious plan. They would steal the crown of Karsus, an artifact of immense arcane power, from the archdevil Mephistopheles himself. They would use this crown to dominate an elder brain, the central intelligence of a mind flayer colony. With the elder brain under their control, they would create an army of mind-controlled thralls, spreading illithid tadpoles across the realm, and building a force that could conquer the Sword Coast and beyond. To execute this plan, the Dark Urge and Gortash recruited Ketheric Thorm, the newly resurrected chosen of Miakal. With a representative from each of the dead three, the conspiracy was complete. The three chosen worked together, despite their gods' historical rivalries, because the plan benefited all of them. Bane would gain an empire of dominated subjects. Miakal would spread death and undeath. Bal would eventually receive the sacrifice of millions when the Dark Urge betrayed the others and murdered everyone under the Absolute's control, offering the greatest blood sacrifice in history to the Lord of Murder. The three chosen successfully stole the crown of Karsus and made their way to Moonrise Towers, where an elder brain resided in the depths below. They planted the crown upon the brain, binding it to their will through the nether stones. 3 fragments of the crown that each chosen carried. The elder brain was enslaved, the conspiracy was succeeding, and the Dark Urge stood poised to become the architect of apocalyptic slaughter. It was at this moment, in the depths beneath Moonrise Towers, that Orin struck. She had been watching, waiting for her opportunity. The Dark Urge was distracted, focused on the ritual to bind the elder brain, vulnerable in a way they rarely were. Orin drove her dagger, bloodthirst, deep into the Dark Urge's skull, splitting their head open with a single, perfectly placed strike. As the Dark Urge collapsed, Orin took an illithid tadpole and forced it into their brain, infecting them with the very parasite they had planned to use on others. Then she left them to die. The Dark Urge, Bal's perfect creation, lay broken and infected in the depths, their memories bleeding out with their blood. Orin claimed their netherstone, declared herself Bal's new chosen, and took the Dark Urge's place in the conspiracy. Gortash and Ketheric accepted this change, though neither fully trusted Orin. She was more unstable than the Dark Urge had been, more unpredictable, more likely to derail the plan with her theatrical murders and artistic pretensions. But Baal himself seemed to accept Orin's claim. The god of murder granted her his blessing, recognized her as his chosen, empowered her with a portion of his divine essence, whether this was because he genuinely preferred Orin or simply because the dark urge was presumed dead. And Orin was the next best option remains unclear. What is certain is that Orin took her new position with fanatical devotion. She was no longer second best, no longer the understudy. She was Baal's chosen daughter, and she intended to prove herself worthy of that honor. In the months that followed, as the absolute conspiracy progressed, Orin established herself in Baldur's Gate. She commanded the cult of Baal from the temple beneath the city, sending out her unholy assassins to spread terror and chaos. These assassins, many of whom were doppelgangers like Orin herself, infiltrated the city's population. They murdered important figures, creating elaborate crime scenes that spread fear throughout the populace. Orin provided them with a list of targets, individuals whose deaths would destabilize the city and prepare it for the Absolute's takeover. But Orin's goals were not entirely aligned with those of Gortash and Ketheric. While they wanted to dominate and control the city, to turn its population into mind-controlled thralls serving the dead three, Orin wanted something more final. She wanted to sacrifice everyone in Baldur's Gate to Baal, to paint the entire city red with blood, to create an offering so massive that her father would grant her the ultimate reward. She envisioned the citizens turning on each other, driven mad by fear and paranoia, murdering their neighbors and family members in an orgy of violence that would reduce the city to a blood-soaked ruin. This fundamental disagreement created tension between Orin and her fellow chosen. Gortash, in particular, grew increasingly frustrated with Orin's unreliability and her tendency to prioritize theatrical murders over strategic objectives. He recognized that Orin was planning to betray the Alliance, that she had no intention of sharing power or following the agreed-upon plan. But with Ketheric still alive and the conspiracy still intact, Gortash tolerated Orin's presence, calculating that she could be dealt with later. After Ketheric's death at Moonrise Towers, after you claim his Netherstone and break the Absolute's hold over 1/3 of its power, the fragile alliance between Orin and Gortash shatters entirely. Orin confronts Gortash in his quarters at Worm's Rock, shape-shifted into the form of one of his servants. She threatens him repeatedly, makes clear her intention to betray him, mocks his attempts to maintain control. Gortash tries to reason with her, urges her to focus on reuniting the Netherstones and reestablishing control over the Elder Brain. But Orin has no interest in cooperation anymore. It is during Act 3 that Orin's shape-shifting abilities become most apparent to you as the player. She infiltrates your camp, taking the form of one of your companions and kidnapping another. Gortash reveals this infiltration if you speak with him, warning you that someone in your camp is not who they appear to be. The revelation that Orin has been among you, listening to your conversations, watching your movements, creates a profound sense of paranoia and violation. Orin also appears throughout the city in various disguises. She might be Zethino at the circus of last days, or a flaming fist guard, or a blacksmith, or a dying thug. Each time she taunts you, threatens the person she has kidnapped from your camp, and demonstrates her complete lack of fear. She wants you to come to her, wants you to face her in Baal's temple, wants the confrontation that will prove once and for all who is worthy of being the murder god's chosen. If you are playing as the Dark Urge Origin, Orin's taunts take on additional layers of cruelty and significance. She mocks you for your memory loss, reveals details of your shared past, gloats about how she stole your position and left you to die. She calls you sibling, speaks of the bond you once shared, reminds you that you were once partners in murder before she drove her blade into your brain. For the Dark Urge, the confrontation with Orin is deeply personal, a reckoning with both their own dark past and the one who betrayed them. To reach Orin, you must first gain access to the Temple of Baal. This requires impressing the Murder Tribunal, a gathering of Baal's most devoted followers, who judge whether supplicants are worthy to enter the temple. You must present yourself before this tribunal and demonstrate that you understand the value of murder, that you can kill without hesitation or mercy. The tribunal is presided over by Servak Anshev, Orin's father and grandfather, now an ancient warrior sustained by dark magic and devotion to Baal. Servak himself is a figure from Baldur's Gate's past, the antagonist of the first game in the series, a Baal spawn who once attempted to start a war to create enough death to resurrect his father. He was defeated, but has returned, either resurrected or never truly destroyed, now serving as one of Baal's most loyal servants. His relationship with Orin is complex and disturbing. He views her as a tool, a weapon he helped create through the deliberate incest with his own daughter Helena. Historical accounts suggest he ordered Helena to sacrifice Orin to Baal when the girl was still young, a command that led to Orin killing her own mother in self-defense. This moment, Orin's murder of Helena, was formative in shaping who she became. It was not a simple case of defending herself. It was the moment when Orin fully embraced what she was, when she proved to Servak and to Baal himself that she was willing to do anything, to kill anyone, even her own mother, in service to the murder god. Rather than being punished for matricide, Orin was praised. She had passed a test, demonstrated her worthiness, earned her place in the cult's hierarchy. The message was clear. Love, family, mercy, these were weaknesses to be discarded. Only murder mattered. Only Baal's will was important. Once you gain access to the Temple of Baal, you descend into the depths beneath Baldur's Gate to face Orin in her sanctum. The temple itself is a twisted cathedral dedicated to murder, decorated with bones and blood, featuring altars where countless victims have been sacrificed to the Lord of Murder. At the central altar, you find Orin with her kidnapped hostage, surrounded by her cultists, ready for the final confrontation. The encounter with Orin offers multiple paths. You can attempt to talk her down, to reach whatever small part of her might still be capable of questioning her devotion. If you are playing as the Dark Urge, you can challenge her to a duel, as is traditional among Bhaalspawn, invoking the old laws of the murder cult that say succession should be determined through ritual combat. You can learn through dialogue more about Orin's tragic history, her manipulation by Servak and Baal, the act that she has never truly had free will or choice in her life. Some players have noted that Orin, more than perhaps any other villain in Baldur's Gate 3, deserves sympathy. She was conceived through incest, specifically to be a weapon. She was raised in isolation from normal society, taught from birth that murder was holy. She was ordered to kill her own mother. She was manipulated by her father and grandfather. She was used by Baal as a tool, promised love and acceptance, but given only more demands for blood. Every choice she made was shaped by abuse and indoctrination. She never had a chance to be anything other than what she became. Yet sympathy does not change what Orin has done. She has murdered countless innocents. She has created terror and suffering throughout Baldur's Gate. She has kidnapped and threatened to kill your companion. She is an active threat to everyone in the city and beyond. Whatever tragic circumstances shaped her, she must be stopped. The confrontation inevitably turns to combat unless you can convince her to turn against Baal himself. A difficult proposition for someone who has never known anything but her father's will. When combat begins, Orin transforms. She invokes Baal's power, becoming the Slayer, a monstrous form that represents the murder god's avatar. This transformation changes her from a nimble assassin into a hulking monstrosity of claws and rage, a being of pure killing instinct. The battle tests everything you have learned, requires tactical thinking and strong party composition, challenges you with waves of cultists supporting their champion. When Orin finally falls, when the Slayer form collapses and she returns to her mortal shape, there can be a moment of clarity. In some outcomes, Orin realizes in her final moments that she was used, that Baal never truly loved her, that she was always just a tool to be discarded when no longer useful. She dies as she lived, a victim of the murder god's manipulations, a tragedy wrapped in monstrosity. From her corpse, you claim the second Netherstone, one step closer to confronting the Absolute itself. Orin's story is the tale of a person who never had the opportunity to choose who they would become. She is evil, undeniably so, responsible for atrocities that cannot be excused, but she is also a victim, a child abused and molded into a weapon, never given the chance to develop empathy or moral reasoning outside the cult's teachings. Her tale serves as a dark mirror to the Dark Urge's story, showing what happens when a Bhaalspawn fully embraces their heritage versus attempting to resist it. Section 4. Lord Inver Gortash, the chosen of Bane. Of the three chosen who orchestrate the absolute conspiracy, Inver Gortash is perhaps the most purely ambitious. Where Ketheric fell into darkness through grief and Orin was born into it through blood, Gortash climbed to power through calculated cunning and ruthless determination. He is a self-made tyrant, a man who started with nothing and seized everything through manipulation, betrayal, and an iron will to dominate. His story is one of revenge against those who wronged him and a relentless pursuit of control over everything and everyone around him. Inver Gortash was not born into privilege or power. He entered the world as the son of Dravo and Sally Flyme, cobblers who ran a modest shop called Flyme's Cobblers in the lower city of Baldur's Gate. The Flymes were common folk, working-class people who struggled to make ends meet in a city where wealth and status determined one's worth, though specific details about his early childhood are scarce. We can infer from Gortash's own brief references and the evidence found at his parents' shop that young Inver grew up in modest circumstances, watching his parents repair shoes for customers who looked down on them, who treated them as servants rather than skilled craftspeople. The Flyme family fell into debt. The exact circumstances remain unclear, but the debts grew large enough that Dravo and Sally could see no way to repay what they owed. Desperate and facing ruin, they made a choice that would haunt them for the rest of their lives, though perhaps not in the way they deserved. They sold their son to settle their debts. They traded Inver, their own child, to a warlock in exchange for financial relief. The warlock who purchased young Inver was no ordinary spellcaster. This was Raphael, a Cambion, a half-devil who maintained a domain in the 9 hells known as the House of Hope. Raphael collected souls and servants, building his power through contracts and bargains with desperate mortals. He styled himself as cultured and sophisticated, a devil who appreciated art and refinement even as he tortured those who displeased him. To Raphael, Inver was just another acquisition, a mortal child who could be trained as a servant, used as leverage, or simply tormented for amusement. Based on the limited evidence we find in the game, including hints in the House of Hope itself, Inver's time there was formative in the worst possible ways. He was a child trapped in hell, literally, surrounded by devils and the souls of the damned. The House of Hope existed as a pocket dimension within Avernus, the first layer of the 9 hells, a place of fire and suffering where devils plotted and mortals screamed. Raphael's domain was more refined than the wastelands outside, decorated with stolen art and treasures. But it was no less a prison for those trapped within it. During his captivity, young Inver witnessed the nature of infernal hierarchy firsthand. He saw how Raphael dominated those beneath him through contracts and cruelty, how power was the only currency that mattered in the hells, how mercy was weakness and compassion was foolishness. These lessons sank deep into the boy's psyche. He learned that the world was divided into those who controlled and those who were controlled, masters and slaves, tyrants and victims. And he learned that he never wanted to be a victim again. It was likely during this period that Enver first encountered the teachings of Bane, the Lord of Tyranny. Whether through a fellow prisoner who worshipped the god of domination, or through his own desperate search for something that could give him power over his circumstances, Enver found in Bane's doctrine a philosophy that resonated with his experiences. Bane taught that strength was everything, that the strong should rule the weak, that control and domination were not merely acceptable, but righteous. For a child who had been sold by his parents and enslaved by a devil, these teachings offered a path forward, a way to ensure he would never be powerless again. Eventually, Enver escaped the House of Hope. The exact method of his escape is not detailed in the available records, but escape he did, fleeing Avernus and returning to Baldur's Gate. He was older now, no longer the helpless child who had been sold into bondage. He had survived hell itself, had learned its lessons, had emerged hardened and focused. He returned to his home city with nothing but his cunning and his ambition, determined to rise above the poverty and powerlessness of his origins. Gortash began his ascent through Baldur's Gate's underworld by dealing in weapons. The black market for arms was lucrative, supplying mercenaries, criminals, and various factions with the tools of violence they needed to pursue their goals. Gortash proved exceptionally skilled at this trade. He understood that weapons were merely a means to an end, that what people really wanted was power and security. He sold them the instruments of that power, and in doing so, he accumulated wealth and connections. As his operation expanded, Gortash came into conflict with the established powers of Baldur's Gate's criminal underworld. The Knights of the Shield, a secretive organization that controlled much of the black market trade, viewed Gortash as a competitor and a threat. They attempted to maintain their monopoly through intimidation and violence. But Gortash was not easily cowed. He had learned in the hells that fear was a tool, and he wielded it expertly. Gortash also competed with the Gentarim, a vast mercantile network with connections across Faerun. The Gentarim had long controlled trade routes through the Shinthar Valley, the region surrounding Baldur's Gate. Through careful manipulation and strategic alliances, Gortash managed to supplant the Gentarim's position in the valley, taking control of the arms trade in this crucial region. This was no small accomplishment. The Gentarim were powerful and well-established, but Gortash outmaneuvered them through superior tactics and ruthless efficiency. During this period of expansion, Gortash acquired access to a rare and valuable resource, infernal iron. This material, forged in the Nine Hells and imbued with infernal properties, was exceptionally difficult to obtain. Whether Gortash had smuggled some from the House of Hope during his escape, or whether he maintained contacts within the Hells who could supply him, he now possessed something his competitors did not. Infernal iron could be used to create weapons and armor of exceptional quality, giving Gortash yet another advantage in the arms trade. As his wealth and influence grew, Gortash recognized that he needed protection. Operating in the criminal underworld meant making enemies, and enemies often attempted to solve their problems through assassination. Gortash hired a young tiefling woman named Karlach Cliffgate as his personal bodyguard. Karlach was strong, loyal, and capable, exactly what Gortash needed to keep himself safe while he consolidated his power. Karlach served Gortash faithfully. By all accounts, she believed they were friends, that the relationship went beyond mere employer and employee. She trusted him, protected him, stood by his side as he built his empire. This trust would prove to be catastrophic for her. Gortash, always calculating, always planning several moves ahead, saw in Karlach an opportunity too valuable to pass up. Gortash made a deal with Zariel, the archdevil who ruled Avernus, the very same layer of hell where Raphael's House of Hope existed. Zariel needed test subjects for a diabolical experiment involving infernal engines, mechanical hearts powered by hellfire that could grant mortals supernatural strength and resilience. Gortash offered Karlach in exchange for the knowledge and materials needed to mass-produce these engines. He betrayed the woman who had protected him, selling her into infernal slavery just as he himself had been sold as a child. The parallel is striking and deeply revealing of Gortash's psychology. He had suffered the trauma of being sold by those who should have protected him. Yet, when the opportunity arose, he inflicted that same trauma on someone who trusted him. Rather than breaking the cycle of betrayal, he perpetuated it, proving that his experiences in the hells had not taught him empathy, but rather had reinforced his belief that the strong exploit the weak and trust is a liability. Karlach was dragged to Avernus and forcibly implanted with an infernal engine in place of her heart. She spent years fighting in the Blood War, the eternal conflict between devils and demons, serving as a warrior in Zariel's armies. Meanwhile, Gortash used the knowledge gained from this bargain to create the Steel Watch, an army of mechanical constructs powered by infernal engines. These automatons would become crucial to his plans for dominating Baldur's Gate, tireless soldiers who could enforce his will without question or mercy. With his criminal empire established and his wealth secured, Gortash turned his attention to legitimate power. He began cultivating relationships with Baldur's Gate's nobility and political elite, presenting himself as a respectable businessman and military advisor. He used his knowledge of the arms trade and his connections throughout the region to make himself indispensable to the city's rulers. When they needed weapons, he could provide them. When they needed intelligence about potential threats, he had sources. When they needed advice on military matters, he offered his expertise. Through careful manipulation and strategic bribes, Gortash worked his way into the confidence of the city's most powerful figures. He became known as Lord Gortash, a title that obscured his humble origins and criminal activities beneath a veneer of respectability. The cobbler's son, who had been sold into slavery, was now dining with dukes and advising the city's leadership on matters of state. It was a remarkable transformation, achieved through ruthless ambition and absolute dedication to the pursuit of power. But Gortash's ambitions extended far beyond simply being wealthy or influential. He had devoted himself to Bane, the god of tyranny, and Bane's teachings demanded more than mere success. A true follower of Bane sought absolute domination, total control over others, the right to rule without question or challenge. Gortash wanted nothing less than to become the undisputed master of Baldur's Gate, and eventually, the entire Sword Coast. It was during this period that Gortash formed a partnership with the Dark Urge, the original chosen of Baal. The nature of their relationship remains somewhat mysterious, complicated by the Dark Urge's amnesia in the game's present timeline. However, it is clear that Gortash and the Dark Urge developed a genuine rapport, something approaching actual friendship, despite their service to gods who were traditional enemies. Gortash trusted the Dark Urge in ways he trusted almost no one else, valued their opinion, and relied on their particular skills as an assassin and strategist. Together, Gortash and the Dark Urge conceived of an audacious plan. They would steal the crown of Karsus, an artifact of immense arcane power, from Mephistopheles himself. Mephistopheles was one of the most powerful archdevils in the Nine Hells, a being of terrible intelligence and magical might, who ruled the 8th layer of Hell, Cania. Stealing from such a creature was suicidal madness. But Gortash and the Dark Urge believed they could succeed where others would not even dare to try. The crown of Karsus was an artifact from the ancient Netherese Empire, created by the archwizard Karsus in his doomed attempt to become a god. For a brief moment, the crown had granted Karsus divine power before his ambition destroyed him and brought down Netherese civilization. The crown survived, eventually falling into Mephistopheles' possession. Its power to grant godlike abilities made it the perfect tool for what Gortash and the Dark Urge planned. Through careful planning and the assistance of various allies, including possibly the mysterious infernal coordinator Helsik, who could open portals to the Hells, Gortash and the Dark Urge successfully infiltrated Mephistopheles' vault and stole the crown of Karsus. This was an achievement of legendary proportions, the kind of heist that would be sung about for generations if anyone knew the full details. They had robbed one of the most powerful beings in existence and escaped with their lives and their prize. With the crown of Karsus in their possession, Gortash and the Dark Urge needed allies to execute the next phase of their plan. They recruited Ketheric Thorm, recently resurrected by Miakul, and seeking to serve the Lord of Death. With representatives of all 3 dead 3 united, the conspiracy was complete. Each brought something crucial to the plan. Ketheric provided military might and a base of operations at Moonrise Towers. The Dark Urge brought the fanatical killers of Baal's cult. Gortash contributed his political influence, his steel watch, and his strategic brilliance. The three chosen traveled to Moonrise Towers and descended into the Mind Flayer colony that existed in the depths below. There they found an elder brain, the massive telepathic entity that served as the central intelligence for a Mind Flayer hive. Using the crown of Karsus, they enslaved the elder brain, binding it to their will through the power of the ancient artifact. They divided the crown into 3 netherstones, one for each chosen, ensuring that control over the brain required all 3 working in concert. With the elder brain under their control, the chosen created the Absolute, a false god designed to gather worship, and spread their influence across Faerun. They began infecting people with modified illithid tadpoles, parasites that would allow the Absolute, really the enslaved elder brain, to control the infected while making them believe they were receiving the blessing of a benevolent deity. The conspiracy was vast and sophisticated, playing on people's desires for purpose and power while secretly enslaving them. Gortash's role in the conspiracy focused on Baldur's Gate itself. He continued his rise through the city's political structure, using his influence to position allies in key locations and undermine potential opposition. When Duke Revengard, the Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate and leader of the Flaming Fist mercenary company, began investigating strange occurrences connected to the cult, Gortash arranged for him to be captured and infected with a tadpole. With Revengard under his control, Gortash eliminated one of the few people in the city with the power and integrity to stop him. Gortash also dealt with the Knights of the Shield, his old rivals in the criminal underworld. He discovered that their leader, Duke Bellin Stelmane, was being controlled psionically by the Emperor, a renegade Mind Flayer who had been operating independently in Baldur's Gate for years. Rather than seeing this as a threat, Gortash saw an opportunity. He captured the Emperor and delivered the Mind Flayer to the Netherbrain, strengthening the conspiracy's hold over the city while simultaneously destroying the Knights of the Shield's leadership structure. In an act of deeply personal revenge, Gortash returned to Flime's cobblers and infected his own parents with illithid tadpoles. Dravo and Sally Flime, the cobblers who had sold their son to settle their debts decades earlier, became thralls to the Absolute. They were subsumed by the entity their son helped create. This was Gortash's ultimate revenge against those who had betrayed him. Not death, which would have been a mercy, but absolute domination, reducing them to puppets dancing on his strings. After Ketheric's death at Moonrise Towers, after you claim the first Netherstone and disrupt the conspiracy, Gortash continues with his plans undeterred. He arranges his own coronation as Archduke of Baldur's Gate, the city's supreme ruler, in a ceremony at Worm's Rock Fortress. This coronation is both a political masterstroke and a display of tyrannical ambition. Gortash has spent years climbing to this moment, and now he claims the ultimate prize, recognized authority over the entire city. When you confront Gortash at his coronation, he offers you a deal. Rather than fighting, rather than treating you as an enemy, he proposes an alliance. Kill Orin, bring him her netherstone, and together you can rule the absolute and reshape the world. For a player character who is not the Dark Urge, this offer is purely pragmatic on Gortash's part. A calculation that an alliance serves his interests better than conflict. But if you are playing as the Dark Urge, Gortash's greeting is genuinely warm. He calls you his favorite assassin, expresses relief that you survived, makes clear that he much preferred working with you rather than Orin. This moment reveals something important about Gortash's character. Despite his ruthless nature, despite his countless betrayals, he appears capable of forming genuine connections, at least with those he views as equals. The Dark Urge was his partner, his co-conspirator in the grandest scheme either of them had ever conceived. Their relationship, whatever its exact nature, mattered to him in ways that few relationships did. He is a tyrant, yes, but he is also a man who craves having someone who understands him, who can match his ambition and cunning. If you accept Gortash's alliance and kill Orin, he tests you when you return with her netherstone. He demands that you give him both netherstones, yours and Orin's, placing all the power in his hands. If you comply, if you hand over the stones, he sees you as weak-willed and immediately betrays you, attacking with his steel watch and loyal forces. But if you refuse, if you twice deny his demand, he reveals he was testing you. Your refusal proves you are strong, that you understand power, that you are worthy of being his ally. It is a very Banite way of thinking, respecting strength and despising weakness. The final confrontation with Gortash can occur in several ways depending on your choices throughout Act 3. If you maintain your alliance with him, he meets you at the Morphic Pool beneath the city when it is time to confront the Netherbrain. The plan is to use all 3 Netherstones together to reassert control over the Elder Brain and command it to submit. But the plan fails. The Netherbrain has grown too powerful, has developed ambitions of its own beyond simply serving the dead 3 and their chosen. As the party struggles to dominate the brain, Gortash panics. In his fear, he pushes the party aside and attempts to wield all 3 Netherstones alone, trying through sheer force of will and Bane's power to subjugate the Netherbrain. But the brain is too powerful for any single person to control, even a chosen of the dead 3. The Netherbrain kills Gortash, crushing him with its psychic might, ending the ambitions of the man who climbed from cobbler's son to archduke. If you choose to fight Gortash rather than ally with him, the battle can take place either during his coronation or later in Worm's Rock. He is a formidable opponent, wearing the armor of the flawed tyrant and wielding powerful abilities granted by Bane. He commands his steel watch constructs, calls upon Gondian slaves that he has forced to work for him, and uses every tactical advantage at his disposal. He is not a warrior in the traditional sense, but he is dangerous nonetheless, a cunning opponent who has prepared extensively for potential threats. And Gortash's story is ultimately one of cycles repeating. He was betrayed by those who should have protected him, sold into slavery, tormented in hell. Rather than learning compassion from his suffering, rather than choosing to break the cycle, he embraced the philosophy that strength is everything, and the weak exist to be exploited. He betrayed those who trusted him, sold Karlach just as he had been sold, enslaved his parents just as he had been enslaved, built an empire of domination, because domination was all he knew. Yet for all his cruelty and tyranny, Gortash is perhaps the most rational and pragmatic of the three chosen. He can be reasoned with, can form alliances, can recognize when cooperation serves his interests better than conflict. He is a tyrant, yes, but he is a tyrant who understands that even tyranny requires structure and rules. He is Bane's perfect instrument, seeking to reshape the world into a place where the strong rule the weak without apology, where order is maintained through fear and force, where freedom is surrendered in exchange for security under a tyrannical master. Section 5. The Absolute and the Emperor. The greatest deception in Baldur's Gate 3 is not that the Absolute is a false god. The greatest deception is that you have been manipulated from the very beginning by forces you could not perceive, guided along a path that served purposes you did not understand. The conspiracy of the Dead Three, the infection with the illithid tadpole, your protection from the Absolute's control. All of these were orchestrated by beings with agendas that extend far beyond your immediate survival. The Absolute itself is a fabrication, a false deity created to gather worship and control the masses. The symbol of the Absolute combines the holy symbols of all three dead three gods, Bane's black hand representing tyranny and domination, Miakul's white skull representing death and decay, Baal's circle of blood drops representing murder and violence. Together, these symbols form the icon that followers of the Absolute wear and worship, believing they serve a single unified deity, when in reality, they serve three separate gods working in temporary alliance. Behind the facade of the Absolute stands an elder brain, the massive telepathic entity that serves as the central intelligence for mind flayer colonies. Elder brains are among the most powerful psionic creatures in existence, capable of dominating thousands of minds simultaneously, coordinating entire colonies of illithids with perfect efficiency. They are ancient beings, accumulating centuries or even millennia of knowledge and experience. Under normal circumstances, an elder brain controls all mind flayers within its range through an absolute telepathic bond. Individual illithids have no free will when connected to their elder brain. They are extensions of its consciousness, tools it uses to further its goals. But the elder brain that serves as the Absolute is not operating under normal circumstances. This particular elder brain has been enslaved by the crown of Karsus, the artifact stolen from Mephistopheles by Gortash and the Dark Urge. The crown sits upon the brain's massive form, binding it to the will of whoever controls the crown. The three chosen of the dead three divided the crown into 3 netherstones, ensuring that no single individual could dominate the brain alone. Only by working together, or by gathering all 3 stones, could anyone command the entity that had become known as the Absolute. The plan conceived by the dead three and executed by their chosen was audacious in its scope. They would use the enslaved elder brain to create modified illithid tadpoles, parasites that could be implanted in victims to bring them under the Absolute's control. These tadpoles were different from normal illithid parasites. Rather than simply transforming their hosts into mind flayers through seromorphosis, the transformation process that creates illithids, these modified tadpoles would allow the Absolute to dominate the infected while leaving them seemingly unchanged. The victims would believe they had been blessed by a benevolent deity, granted powers and purpose, when in reality they had been enslaved. This army of true souls, as the infected were called, would spread across Faerun, recruiting more followers, infecting more victims, building the Absolute's power base. Eventually, when enough people had been infected, when the conspiracy had spread far enough, the dead three would trigger mass seromorphosis. All the infected would transform into mind flayers simultaneously, creating an army of illithids loyal to the Absolute, and through the Absolute, to the dead three themselves. This army would conquer the Sword Coast, then expand outward, potentially subjugating all of Faerun under the tyranny of Bane, the murder of Baal, and the death of Miakul. But there is a complication that the dead three did not fully account for. The elder brain itself, despite being enslaved by the crown of Karsus, retained its own consciousness and ambitions. It was bound to obey the commands given through the Netherstones, forced to play its role in the conspiracy, but it was not truly loyal. It waited, observed, planned. An elder brain thinks in terms of centuries and millennia. It could afford to be patient, to bide its time until the opportunity arose to break free of its chains and pursue its own agenda. This is where you enter the story. Infected with one of the modified tadpoles during the nautiloid crash, you should have become a thrall of the Absolute, your will subsumed by the elder brain's domination. But something protected you. An artifact, a mysterious prism that you did not know you carried, shielded your mind from the Absolute's control. Inside this prism dwells a being of immense psionic power, powerful enough to block an elder brain's influence. And this being takes the form of your guardian, appearing to you in dreams as someone you trust, someone designed specifically to earn your confidence. The guardian presents themselves as your protector, the one who saved you from becoming a slave to the Absolute. They claim to want to help you, to guide you toward freedom and safety. They appear warm and trustworthy, taking a form pulled from your own subconscious, shaped to be maximally appealing and credible to you specifically. Throughout your early adventures, the Guardian speaks to you during rest, offering advice, warning of dangers, reinforcing that they are on your side and that you should trust them above all others. But the Guardian is not what they appear to be. This beneficent protector, this warm and trustworthy figure, is actually a mind flayer. The Emperor, as this Illithid is known, has been manipulating you from the beginning, presenting itself in a form you would accept while hiding its true nature. The revelation of the Emperor's true form comes as a shock when you finally enter the prism and see what has been protecting you. The beautiful Guardian, the trusted advisor, is revealed as a tentacle-faced aberration, a member of the very species you have been fighting against throughout your journey. The Emperor's true identity goes even deeper than simply being a renegade mind flayer. This Illithid was once a man, a human adventurer and merchant whose name has become legend in Baldur's Gate and beyond. The Emperor was Baldurin, the founder of Baldur's Gate itself, the legendary hero whose statue stands in the city, whose name is synonymous with the adventurous spirit and mercantile success that defines the metropolis. Learning that Baldurin, one of the greatest heroes in the city's history, is not dead, but transformed into a mind flayer, represents a profound subversion of expectations. Baldurin's story begins centuries before the events of Baldur's Gate 3. He was an adventurer and explorer, a man who sailed across the Sea of Swords seeking fortune and glory. During his travels, he discovered an uninhabited harbor in an ideal location for trade. He founded a settlement there, which eventually grew into the city of Baldur's Gate. Baldurin became fabulously wealthy through his trading ventures, but he never settled down to simply enjoy his riches. He continued adventuring, continued seeking new horizons, driven by a restless spirit that could not be satisfied with mere comfort and security. During one of his voyages, Baldurin's ship encountered a mind flayer vessel. The battle went poorly for Baldurin and his crew. He was captured and subjected to seramorphosis, the process whereby an Illithid tadpole transforms its host into a new mind flayer. The tadpole consumed Baldurin's brain, replacing it with itself, transforming his body into that of a mind flayer. The man, Baldurin, died in that moment, replaced by a new being that possessed all of Baldurin's memories, but had become something fundamentally different. Most newly created mind flayers immediately fall under the telepathic control of their elder brain, becoming drones in the hive mind. But something was different for the mind flayer that had been Baldurin, whether through force of will, through some quirk of his unique personality, or through circumstances not fully understood. He retained his individuality. He broke free from the elder brain's control, becoming what is known as a rogue Illithid, a mind flayer with free will and independent thought. This freedom was precious and terrifying in equal measure. The Emperor, as he came to call himself, having rejected both his human name and his place in the illithid hive mind, found himself alone. He was no longer human, could never return to his former life. But he was also not truly an illithid in the traditional sense. He was something in between, possessing the powers and form of a mind flayer, but retaining the memories, and to some degree, the values of the man he had been. The Emperor could have fled to the far corners of Faerun, could have hidden himself away from civilization entirely. But Baldurin's memories drew him back to Baldur's Gate, to the city he had founded. Despite his transformation, despite becoming a creature that most would consider monstrous, he still felt a connection to the place that bore his name, even if no one knew he had returned. Based on the Emperor's own explanations and the evidence found throughout the city, he operated in secret within Baldur's Gate for decades, possibly even centuries. He used his psionic powers to control key individuals, to manipulate events from the shadows, to protect the city from threats that its mortal inhabitants never knew existed. The Emperor's own account suggests he viewed himself as Baldur's Gate's secret guardian, a hidden protector working behind the scenes to ensure the city's prosperity and safety. Though whether this represents genuine altruism or self-serving rationalization remains a matter of interpretation. He formed an alliance with Duke Bellin Stelmane, dominating her mind psionically, while presenting himself to her as an advisor and partner. Through Stelmane, the Emperor influenced the Knights of the Shield, steering the organization's activities in ways that benefited Baldur's Gate while advancing his own interests. He accumulated wealth, power, and influence, all while remaining completely unknown to the general population. He developed a sophisticated understanding of politics and manipulation, learning to control multiple individuals simultaneously while maintaining their useful functions in society. But the Emperor's activities eventually brought him into conflict with the conspiracy of the Dead Three. When Gortash discovered that a rogue mind flayer was controlling Duke Stelmane, he saw both a threat and an opportunity. Gortash captured the Emperor and delivered him to the enslaved Elder Brain. The Nether Brain, as the Elder Brain augmented by the crown of Karsus had become known, dominated the Emperor, forcing him back under the control of an Elder Brain after decades or centuries of freedom. Being enthralled again was a nightmare for the Emperor. He had tasted freedom, had exercised his will independently, had built a life of sorts. Now he was reduced to a drone once more, his thoughts no longer his own, his actions dictated by the Nether Brain's commands. He was forced to serve the conspiracy he had no loyalty to advance goals he did not share, to be a tool in someone else's plan. But the Nether Brain itself was growing stronger, developing ambitions beyond simply serving the Dead Three. As it accumulated more power, as more victims were infected and brought under its control, the Elder Brain began to see possibilities beyond the role assigned to it. Why should it serve gods, even fallen gods seeking to return to power, when it could become a god itself? Why should it share power with the three chosen when it could eliminate them and rule alone? The Netherbrain began planning its own betrayal, laying groundwork for the moment when it would be strong enough to break free of the crown of Karsus's control entirely. Part of this plan involved the Emperor. The Netherbrain allowed the Emperor to break free of its control, setting him up as a seemingly independent actor, while actually using him as a pawn in a larger game. The Emperor, believing he had genuinely escaped the Netherbrain's domination, took the artifact known as the Astral Prism, which contained Orpheus, the imprisoned prince of the Githyanki people. Orpheus possessed incredible psionic abilities, powerful enough to shield minds from elder brain domination, even while imprisoned. The Emperor placed himself within the prism alongside Orpheus, using the Githyanki prince's power to protect himself and anyone else the prism shielded from the Netherbrain's influence. When the Nautiloid crashed and you were infected with a tadpole, the Emperor used the prism to protect you. He needed allies, needed individuals who were infected but free from the Absolute's control. People who would have motivation to fight against the Dead Three and their conspiracy. You and your companions, all infected with tadpoles, but shielded by the prism, became the Emperor's chosen instruments. He guided you toward Moonrise Towers, toward confronting Ketheric Thorm, toward gathering the nether stones that could be used to dominate the Elder Brain. Throughout this journey, the Emperor manipulated you with careful precision. He presented himself as your protector, your ally, the one being you could trust in a world of enemies and conspiracies. He used the guardian persona to make himself palatable, knowing that if you saw his true form too early, you might reject him out of instinctive fear and prejudice against Illithids. He guided your decisions subtly, pushing you toward courses of action that served his goals while making you believe you were acting independently. When the truth of the Emperor's nature is finally revealed, when you see him as he truly is, his manipulations become more overt. He argues that his deceptions were necessary, that you would not have trusted a mind flayer, that the guardian persona was simply practical rather than malicious. He insists that your goals align, that both of you want to stop the Absolute and prevent the Netherbrain's plan from coming to fruition. He presents himself as a pragmatic ally, someone willing to do what is necessary to achieve mutual objectives. But there is another figure in the prism whose existence complicates the Emperor's narrative. Answer, a bronze dragon who was once Baldurin's closest companion, also has a role in this story. In the depths below Baldur's Gate, in an ancient worm's lair, you can discover Answer's corpse and learn the truth of what happened between the dragon and the mind flayer who had once been his friend. Answer could not accept what Baldurin had become. When the transformation into a mind flayer occurred, Answer searched for years to find his lost friend. When he finally discovered the truth, when he learned that Baldurin had become an Illithid, the dragon was heartbroken. Answer pleaded with the Emperor to let Answer end his existence, to accept death rather than continue living as an aberration. The emperor refused. He wanted to live, wanted to retain his existence, even in his transformed state. Answer, unable to accept this, attempted to kill the emperor anyway, believing that death would be preferable to life as a mind flayer. But the emperor was powerful, his psionic abilities formidable. In the conflict that followed, the emperor killed Answer, slaying the dragon who had been Baldurin's most loyal companion. This act severed one of the last emotional connections the emperor had to his former life, proving that whatever he had become, he was no longer the man Baldurin had been. The emperor's relationship with you follows similar patterns of pragmatic manipulation. He wants you to trust him, to work with him, to help him achieve his goals. But he is also willing to threaten you when necessary, to make clear that he values his own survival above your well-being. If you question him too much, if you express doubt or hostility, he reminds you that he could simply withdraw the prism's protection, leaving you vulnerable to the Netherbrain's control. It is a relationship built on mutual need rather than genuine trust or affection. The Emperor's ultimate goal is freedom and survival. He wants to remain free from Elder Brain control, wants to continue existing as an independent being, wants to protect Baldur's Gate because he still identifies with the city despite his transformation. He proposes that you work together to dominate the Netherbrain using the 3 Netherstones, to take control of the entity and use it to protect the city and yourselves. His vision, based on what he shares, appears to involve a future where he guides Baldur's Gate from the shadows once more, with you as his ally and agent in the mortal world. But there is an alternative path, one the Emperor desperately wants to prevent. Inside the prism with him is Orpheus, the Githyanki prince whose psionic power is actually what shields you from the Netherbrain. The Emperor has been using Orpheus as a battery, exploiting the prince's abilities while keeping him imprisoned in a condition where he cannot interfere. Orpheus was imprisoned by Vlaakith, the Lich Queen of the Githyanki, because his power and royal bloodline threatened her tyrannical rule. If freed, Orpheus could rally the Githyanki people, could challenge Vlaakith's authority, could become a force for liberation of his enslaved people. If you choose to free Orpheus, the Emperor is furious. This act threatens his survival, because without Orpheus to use as a shield, the Emperor becomes vulnerable to the Netherbrain's domination once more. He warns you against this choice, argues that Orpheus cannot be trusted, insists that freeing the prince will doom everyone. If you persist, if you free Orpheus despite the Emperor's objections, he abandons you. More than that, he betrays you, joining forces with the Netherbrain rather than risk losing his autonomy. His fear of being enslaved again outweighs any loyalty he might have developed toward you. This betrayal reveals the truth of the Emperor's character. He is not evil in the traditional sense, not motivated by cruelty or malice, but he is profoundly selfish, prioritizing his own survival and freedom above all other considerations. He will work with you when it serves his interests, will guide and protect you when doing so advances his goals. But the moment his own existence is threatened, he will betray you without hesitation. He is, in the end, exactly what he claims to be: a pragmatic being making the choices necessary for survival in a hostile world. The choice between trusting the Emperor and freeing Orpheus becomes one of the most significant decisions in Baldur's Gate 3. Neither option is without cost. If you work with the Emperor, you achieve your immediate goal of stopping the Netherbrain, but you leave a manipulative Illithid in position to continue dominating Baldur's Gate from the shadows, potentially becoming the next great threat. If you free Orpheus, you honor the prince's right to freedom and give the Githyanki people hope for liberation from Vlaakith. But you must deal with the Emperor's betrayal and find another way to shield yourselves from the Netherbrain's influence. The Emperor represents a particular kind of villain, one who does not see himself as villainous at all. He believes his actions are justified, that his manipulation and control serve the greater good, that his perspective as an immortal being with centuries of experience gives him the right to guide lesser mortals toward outcomes he deems optimal. He is the benevolent dictator taken to its logical extreme, the philosopher king who rules through deception and domination rather than through consent and transparency. His story also raises profound questions about identity and transformation. Is the Emperor still Baldurin in any meaningful sense? Or did Baldurin die when the tadpole consumed his brain? Can a being retain its essential self when its very nature has been fundamentally altered? The Emperor insists he is still himself, still the same consciousness that once sailed the Sea of Swords and founded a great city. But his actions, his willingness to dominate others, his pragmatic cruelty, these suggest that whatever he has become, it is not the hero whose statue stands in the city he claims to protect. The absolute conspiracy, the Netherbrain's ambitions, and the Emperor's manipulations all converge in the final act of Baldur's Gate 3. The revelation that the supposed savior who has been guiding you is himself a mind flayer with questionable motives forces you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about your situation. The comfortable narrative of good versus evil, of heroes fighting against a clear threat, becomes complicated by shades of gray and competing interests. In the end, you must decide who to trust, if anyone, and what price you are willing to pay for victory against the Absolute and the gods who created it. Section 6. Secondary villains Cazador, Ethel, and Vlaakith. Beyond the conspiracy of the Dead Three and the machinations of the Emperor, Baldur's Gate 3 presents a gallery of villains whose cruelty operates on a more personal scale. These antagonists may not threaten the entire Sword Coast with armies of mind-controlled thralls, but their evil is no less profound for being more intimate. They destroy lives one at a time, building empires of suffering through centuries of accumulated cruelty. Each represents a different flavor of evil, from the sadistic predator to the manipulative deceiver, to the tyrannical goddess who devours her own people. Khazador Shar, the vampire lord Khazador Shar, is a creature of pure sadism. A vampire lord who has spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of psychological and physical torture. His grand manor in the upper city of Baldur's Gate conceals horrors that would break most minds simply to witness. For 200 years, Khazador has operated as one of the city's elite, maintaining a respectable facade while indulging in depravities that exceed even typical vampire cruelty. Khazador creates vampire spawn, not out of loneliness or the desire for companionship, but purely to have victims who cannot escape him. A vampire spawn is bound absolutely to their master, unable to disobey direct commands, forced to return when called, enslaved in ways that go beyond mere physical chains. Khazador has created 7 such spawn over the centuries, each one carefully selected not for any positive quality, but for the pleasure he anticipates in breaking them. Among these spawn is Astarion Ancunin, an elf who was a magistrate in Baldur's Gate 200 years ago. Astarion made the mistake of sentencing a group of people who turned out to be connected to a vampire coven. The vampires caught him, beat him nearly to death, and left him bleeding in the street. Khazador found him there on the edge of death and made him an offer. Life of a sort, in exchange for eternal servitude. Astarion, desperate and dying, accepted. He has regretted that choice every day since. Based on Astarion's recollections throughout the game, life as Khazador's spawn was an unending nightmare. Khazador delighted in finding new ways to torment his spawn, inventing elaborate punishments for even imagined slights. He would seal them in the manor's crypts for months or years at a time, leaving them in darkness with nothing but their own thoughts and the gnawing hunger that vampires can never truly escape. He would order them to perform degrading tasks, force them to bring him victims from the city above, make them complicit in his cruelties, so they could not maintain any illusion of innocence. Astarion's particular torment involved being forced to seduce victims and bring them back to the manor for Khazador to feed upon and torture. For 200 years, Astarion played the beautiful, charming seducer, luring people to their doom. Each victim weighed on his conscience, another soul destroyed, because Khazador found amusement in forcing Astarion to be the instrument of their suffering. The psychological damage of this enforced complicity, of being made into a monster against one's will, while retaining enough awareness to hate what one has become, shaped Astarion into someone profoundly damaged. But Khazador's ambitions extended beyond simple sadism. He possessed knowledge of an ancient ritual, the rite of profane ascension, a ceremony that would elevate him from mere vampire lord to something far more powerful. The ritual required a specific sacrifice, 7,000 souls carved with infernal runes and offered up in a single massive blood sacrifice. For decades, Khazador had been preparing for this ritual, carving the necessary runes into the backs of victims and spawn alike, building toward the moment when he could ascend to become a vampire ascendant. A vampire ascendant is not bound by the normal limitations of vampirism. They can walk in sunlight without burning, can cross running water without difficulty, no longer need permission to enter dwellings. Most crucially, a vampire ascendant is not vulnerable to the traditional methods of destroying vampires. They become truly immortal, unkillable by stake or sunlight, immune to the weaknesses that make even vampire lords vulnerable. Cazador sought this power with single-minded obsession, viewing the thousands of deaths required as mere stepping stones to his apotheosis. The 7 spawn were central to the ritual. Each spawn bore the infernal runes necessary to channel the power of the 7,000 sacrificed souls. Astarion himself carried these runes on his back, carved in an infernal script he could not read. For 2 centuries, he had borne these marks without understanding their significance, never knowing he was being prepared as the final component in Cazador's grand design. When Astarion was abducted by the Nautiloid and infected with the tadpole, he found himself free of Cazador's control for the first time in 200 years. The tadpole, ironically, severed the bond between spawn and master, giving Astarion the independence he had dreamed of for centuries. But he knew his freedom was temporary. The tadpole would either kill him through transformation or would be removed, and either way, Cazador would reclaim him. The vampire lord would never simply let a spawn escape. Astarion's only hope was to find Cazador before Cazador found him, and to end the vampire lord permanently. Cazador's manor stands in the upper city, a grand estate that speaks of wealth and taste to those who see only its exterior. Inside, the manor is a house of horrors. The lower levels contain crypts where spawn and victims are sealed away, torture chambers where Cazador has perfected his craft over centuries, and a ritual chamber where the rite of profane ascension is prepared to be enacted. Throughout the manor, one can find the evidence of Cazador's cruelties, the bodies of those who displeased him, the records of torments inflicted, the carefully maintained notes tracking the acquisition of the 7,000 souls needed for his ritual. When you accompany Astarion to confront Cazador, when you descend into the ritual chamber beneath the manor, you find that Cazador has gathered all 7 of his spawn for the final ceremony. The other 6 are already bound in place, suspended in magical circles, their bodies positioned to channel the ritual's power. Cazador intends to complete the rite, to sacrifice all 7,000 marked souls plus his own spawn, ascending to become a being of terrible power. He is moments away from achieving his centuries-long goal when you and Astarion interrupt. The confrontation with Cazador reveals the depth of his monstrosity. He is not apologetic, not regretful, not even particularly angry. He views Astarion's resistance as a temporary inconvenience, the spawn's attempt at independence as amusing but ultimately futile. He fully expects to simply dominate Astarion again, to bend the spawn back to his will and complete the ritual. His arrogance is absolute, his sense of superiority complete. He has spent 2 centuries as an apex predator, and he cannot conceive of his victims truly threatening him. But Astarion is no longer bound, no longer helpless. With your support, he can fight back against the monster who enslaved him. The battle with Cazador tests not just combat prowess, but also Astarion's resolve. Will he break when facing his tormentor, fall back into the psychological patterns of 200 years of abuse, or will he stand firm, claim his freedom through violence against the one who stole his life? When Cazador falls, when the vampire lord is finally destroyed, Astarion faces a terrible temptation. The ritual is prepared, the victims are marked, everything is in place. Astarion could simply take Cazador's place, could substitute himself as the ritual's beneficiary rather than its sacrifice. He could ascend, could become the vampire ascendant himself, could claim the power that Cazador sought. All it would require is sacrificing the 7,000 souls, including his fellow spawn, the only beings in the world who truly understand what he has endured. This choice defines who Astarion will become. If he performs the ritual, if he sacrifices thousands for power, he becomes like Cazador, trading his soul for strength, perpetuating the cycle of abuse by becoming the abuser. If he refuses, if he destroys the ritual and frees his fellow spawn, he breaks the cycle, chooses to remain vulnerable rather than become a monster. Neither choice is without cost, and the decision shapes Astarion's entire future. Auntie Ethel, the hag of the sunlit wetlands, not all monsters lurk in shadows or dwell in crypts. Some wear the mask of the helpful grandmother, the kindly old woman who offers assistance to desperate travelers. Auntie Ethel presents herself as exactly such a figure, a harmless elderly woman selling potions and remedies from her tea house in the sunlit wetlands. But this benevolent appearance is an illusion. Literally and figuratively, the sunlit wetlands are actually the putrid bog, a fetid swamp of decay and disease. And Auntie Ethel is a green hag, a creature of malevolent fey magic, whose true form is a twisted, ancient horror. Hags are creatures who delight in making deals, in offering people exactly what they think they want, and then twisting those wishes into curses. They present themselves as helpers, as solution providers, as beings who can fix what seems unfixable, and technically they can. A hag has magic powerful enough to cure diseases, restore sight to the blind, even bring back loved ones from death. But every deal with a hag comes with a price, and that price is always far greater than the petitioner understands when making their bargain, based on the evidence scattered throughout her lair and the testimonies of her victims. Ethel has been operating in the region around Baldur's Gate for an unknown period, possibly centuries. She finds desperate people, those who have exhausted all other options, those who are willing to grasp at any hope, no matter how unlikely. a pregnant woman whose child may be born with a terrible curse, a man slowly going blind, a woman whose husband has died, leaving her alone and penniless. To each, Ethel offers a solution, a way out of their suffering. And each accepts, not understanding what they are truly agreeing to. The deals Ethel makes always extract a terrible cost. A woman whose child Ethel saved from a curse finds that her daughter can no longer remember her mother. That maternal love has been removed as payment for the cure. A man whose sight Ethel restored discovers that he can now see only terrible truths, that the curse of clear vision shows him betrayals and horrors he was happier not knowing. A woman whose poverty Ethel alleviated learns that her newfound wealth came from her late husband's soul, now serving Ethel in torment. The hag keeps the letter of her agreements while violating their spirit, finding the cruelest possible interpretation of every bargain. Ethel's lair is hidden behind her tea house, accessible through an illusory fireplace that leads down into the depths. The lair itself is a twisted maze of roots and caverns, a place where reality bends according to Ethel's will. Throughout the lair, you find evidence of her various projects. Victims in various stages of transformation, people being turned into monsters, or having their essential natures rewritten by hag magic. A girl whose face has been stolen, reduced to a mask of blank flesh. A man being slowly transformed into a tree. Red caps, murderous fey creatures that serve as Ethel's guards and enforcers. Among Ethel's victims is Marina, a pregnant woman whose husband Connor has recently died. Ethel approached Marina and offered to bring Connor back from death, to restore him so he could meet his child, and Marina would not have to raise the baby alone. Desperate and grieving, Marina agreed to Ethel's terms without fully understanding them. Ethel did indeed resurrect Connor, but as a mindless zombie, a shambling corpse that retains nothing of the man he was. This is Ethel's idea of fulfilling her bargain, technically meeting the terms while inflicting maximum suffering. When you confront Ethel, when you descend into her lair to stop her, she does not immediately attack. Instead, she tries to make a deal with you as well. She offers to remove the tadpole from your head, to cure you of the illithid parasite that threatens to transform you. She can do this, has the magical power to extract the tadpole safely, where most attempts would simply kill you. All she asks in return is that you let her keep Marina, that you walk away and allow the hag to continue her work. One life in exchange for your salvation from seramorphosis seems like a reasonable trade, or so Ethel argues. This is the essence of hag evil. They offer real solutions to real problems, but always at someone else's expense. They force you to become complicit in suffering, to trade another's well-being for your own. If you accept Ethel's deal, if you allow her to take your tadpole in exchange for Marina, you become partially responsible for whatever torments Ethel inflicts on her victim. You have chosen your own survival over protecting someone helpless, exactly the sort of moral compromise that hags delight in extracting. If you refuse, if you fight Ethel rather than bargaining with her, she reveals her true nature. The kindly grandmother facade drops away, replaced by the twisted form of a green hag, a creature of gnarled flesh and wicked claws, ancient and malevolent. She fights with illusions and mind control, creating copies of herself, turning your companions against you. Using every trick accumulated over centuries of predatory existence, her lair itself becomes a weapon. Roots grasping at your feet, clouds of poisonous spores filling the air, the very environment hostile to intruders. Ethel also has thralls, victims of her magic, who serve her against their will. During the fight, she calls upon these thralls to aid her, and herein lies another moral complication. The thralls are innocent people, mind-controlled servants who did not choose to serve the hag. Killing them is self-defense, but it also means destroying people who are themselves victims. Ethel designs her defenses to force you into these terrible choices, to make you complicit in suffering even as you try to stop her. When Ethel is defeated, when the hag finally falls, the full scope of her operations becomes clear. Throughout her lair are the remnants of decades or centuries of deals, the victims in various stages of transformation or torment, the evidence of countless lives ruined by her bargains. Some of these victims can be saved, freed from their curses or transformations. Others are too far gone, their humanity or identity too thoroughly destroyed to be restored. Ethel's legacy is a catalog of suffering, each entry representing someone who came to her in desperation and received damnation instead of salvation. The encounter with Ethel also reveals that she is not unique. She is part of a larger network of hags, creatures who trade information and occasionally cooperate on projects. If you explore thoroughly, you can find evidence that Ethel has been communicating with other hags, possibly even plotting something larger than her individual operations. Hags are most dangerous when they form covens, groups of 3 hags whose combined power exceeds the sum of their individual abilities. This could imply that Ethel is part of such a coven, or planning to form one, which would add another layer of threat to her existence. Vlaakith, the Lich Queen of the Githyanki, the final secondary villain, operates on a scale between the personal cruelty of Cazador and the world-threatening ambitions of the Dead Three. Vlaakith, the 157th to bear that name, rules the Githyanki people as an absolute tyrant, a Lich Queen whose authority is enforced through terror and the systematic consumption of her most powerful subjects. She is both a political threat and an existential horror, a being who has murdered her way to godhood aspirations while enslaving an entire civilization. The Githyanki were once slaves of the Mind Flayers, bred and raised to serve as thralls to the Illithid Empire for untold generations. The Githyanki existed only as extensions of Mind Flayer will. Their incredible martial prowess and psionic potential exploited by their masters. But a leader arose among the slaves, a woman named Gith, who inspired rebellion. The Githyanki rose against their illithid masters, breaking free of mental bondage and waging a war of liberation that shattered the mind flayer empire across multiple worlds. After the rebellion succeeded, after the Githyanki had won their freedom, a schism developed among them. Gith herself advocated for eternal war against the mind flayers, for hunting down every illithid across every plane until the species was extinct. But another leader, Zerthaman, argued for a different path, for peace and rebuilding rather than endless vengeance. The Githyanki split into two peoples: the Githyanki, who followed Gith's philosophy of war, and the Githzerai, who followed Zerthaman's teachings of balance. Gith made a pact with Tiamat, the five-headed dragon queen who rules over chromatic dragons, in exchange for the service of red dragons as mounts and allies for the Githyanki. Gith agreed to serve Tiamat in some capacity. The exact terms of this bargain remain mysterious, but Gith herself disappeared after making it, vanishing into the 9 hells or another plane, never to return. In her absence, her most trusted advisor, Vlakith, assumed leadership of the Githyanki people. That first Vlakith established a line of succession that would become increasingly tyrannical with each generation. The title of Vlakith passed from one queen to the next, each accumulating more power, each growing more paranoid about potential rivals. By the time of Vlakith 157, the current ruler, the position had transformed from military leader to God Empress, from guardian of the people to their oppressor. Vlakith 157 achieved lichdom, transforming herself into an undead sorceress queen sustained by dark magic. As a Lich, she does not age, does not tire, does not suffer from mortal weaknesses. She has ruled for centuries, accumulating power and crushing any who might challenge her authority. Her paranoia has grown so extreme that she views any Githyanki who becomes too powerful as a threat requiring elimination. The Githyanki culture revolves around martial prowess and the accumulation of personal power through combat and psionic training. Warriors seek to prove themselves worthy through great deeds, earning recognition and rising through the strict hierarchy of their society. But this creates a fundamental problem under Vlakith's rule. Any warrior who becomes truly exceptional, who achieves legendary status through their accomplishments, becomes a potential rival to the Lich Queen's authority. And Vlakith has developed a solution to this problem, one that allows her to eliminate threats while presenting it as a reward. When a Githyanki warrior achieves sufficient prowess, when they complete a quest of particular importance or demonstrate exceptional skill, they are called to an audience with Vlakith herself. This is presented as the highest honor imaginable, an opportunity to stand before the Lich Queen and be recognized for one's achievements. The warrior approaches Vlakith's throne in Tunnerath, the Githyanki city built around the corpse of a dead god floating in the astral plane. They kneel before their queen, expecting commendation or reward. And Vlaakith consumes them, draining their life force and power directly into herself, adding their strength to her own. This systematic consumption of her own people's greatest heroes has allowed Vlaakith to accumulate power far beyond what any single individual should possess. She has devoured hundreds or thousands of Githyanki over the centuries, each one adding to her capabilities. She justifies this as necessary for the survival of the Githyanki people, claiming that she needs this power to protect them from external threats. But the reality is that Vlaakith seeks godhood, desires to ascend beyond lichdom into true divinity, and views her own people merely as fuel for her apotheosis. The Githyanki are taught from birth to worship Vlaakith, to view her not just as their ruler, but as a divine figure deserving absolute devotion. Questioning her authority is heresy, punishable by death. Failing to return when summoned is treason, resulting in being hunted by one's own people. The entire Githyanki society has been restructured around maintaining Vlaakith's power, with every individual serving as a potential sacrifice to the Lich Queen's ambitions. Liesel, one of your companions if she survives and joins your party, is a product of this indoctrination. She has been raised to believe Vlaakith is essentially perfect, that the Lich Queen's will is law, that service to Vlaakith is the highest purpose a Githyanki can achieve. Liesel's entire worldview centers on earning Vlaakith's recognition, on proving herself worthy through martial excellence and unwavering loyalty. The crisis comes when Vlaakith learns about the artifact you carry, the astral prism containing Orpheus. Orpheus is the son of Mother Gith herself, the original liberator of the Githyanki people. He possesses incredible psionic power, and more importantly, a legitimate claim to leadership of the Githyanki that supersedes Vlaakith's authority. Vlaakith imprisoned Orpheus long ago, binding him within the prism specifically to prevent him from challenging her rule. The fact that the prism has resurfaced, that Orpheus might potentially be freed, represents an existential threat to Vlaakith's power. Vlaakith commands you to enter the prism and kill Orpheus, to eliminate this threat to her authority. She promises rewards, recognition, anything you desire, if you will simply murder the imprisoned prince. If you refuse, or if you hesitate, Vlaakith attempts to eliminate you herself, attacking with the full force of her accumulated power. For Liesel, this moment is shattering. She witnesses her goddess queen attempting to murder her for the crime of not immediately obeying a command to commit regicide. The cognitive dissonance forces Liesel to confront the reality that Vlaakith is not the benevolent protector she has been taught to worship, but rather a tyrant willing to destroy anyone who threatens her power. If you free Orpheus, if you release him from his prison despite Vlaakith's commands, you give the Githyanki people hope for liberation from the Lich Queen's tyranny. Orpheus immediately recognizes what Vlaakith has become, understands that she has perverted everything his mother fought for, he commits himself to overthrowing Vlaakith and freeing his people from her oppression, offering to aid you against the Netherbrain before returning to Tunnerath to challenge the Lich Queen directly. Vlaakith represents a particular kind of villainy, the revolutionary who becomes the tyrant, the liberator who transforms into an oppressor. The Githyanki freed themselves from mind flayer slavery only to fall under the domination of their own leader. Vlaakith's rule demonstrates how the structures of oppression can be replicated even by those who once fought against them. How power corrupts even those who claim to exercise it for the protection of others. These three villains, Cazador, Ethel, and Vlaakith, each operating on their own scale and with their own methods, represent the diversity of evil present in Baldur's Gate 3. They remind you that threats come in many forms, that monsters wear many faces, and that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those who have convinced their victims to accept their own oppression. The villains of Baldur's Gate 3, from the gods themselves down to the individual monsters who prey upon the desperate, create a world where evil is not simple or one-dimensional. Each antagonist has history, motivation, methods that make sense from their twisted perspectives. Understanding these villains, learning their stories, recognizing the patterns of abuse and domination they represent, this knowledge empowers you to stand against them more effectively, whether facing the conspiracy of the Dead Three, resisting the manipulation of the Emperor, or confronting the personal cruelties of vampires and hags. You engage with evil in all its forms throughout your journey. The choices you make, the alliances you form, the principles you uphold or abandon, these shape not just the outcome of your adventure, but the kind of hero or villain you yourself become. If you enjoyed this deep exploration into the dark hearts of Baldur's Gate 3's antagonists, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the lore of Dungeons and Dragons and the rich worlds of role-playing games. Thank you for journeying into darkness with me today.